Good morning. Well, when we sang Waymaker, wow, I just was overwhelmed by the words, and I couldn't sing. I was really choked up, and my eyes were all wet, and so I asked Shelley if she had some Kleenex, and she gave me that. Today we honor God with our gifts, pledges, and commitments to Let's Go, and it is to Let's Go, which is drawn from Psalm 122:1. I rejoiced with those who said to me, let's go to the house of the Lord. So yeah, and not far from here, our Lord's house that's on our minds is under construction right now. And it's going up at a really crazy clip. Every day there's something new to see. That will slow, I'm sure, and then internally the work will go on behind the walls. But right now there's an awful lot happening there. And what we give and pledge today should glorify God, just as we intend our worship there to glorify God, and our service there to glorify God, and our outreach from there to glorify God. And when we sing these songs and we get choked up, we glorify God. We're overwhelmed by a flood of gratitude, as Christy said. As fast as our minds can work, faster than we can speak, like a soaring hawk, we see the vistas of what God's done in our lives. Yeah. I was there wondering, what am I doing here, Lord? We never think, who you see is never who we think we are. And sometimes we're in awe that God should use us in ways that we still feel unworthy. But I wanted to speak about glorifying God, and I hope that in my shaky voice, I'm doing that as well. If I was asked what will glorify God, I would answer whatever would prove that I know God's character and I honor who God is. I would seek to glorify God by proving that I know His character and I honor who He is. That God is worthy of my first and my best, because I know His character and I know who He is. I wasn't born a pastor. I didn't graduate from high school a pastor. I had a pastor, and my pastor's name was Bill Yeager. And if there were things that I caught from him, one of the most important things I caught from him, in fact, if he would chew you out, you never felt it was personal. You felt like it was because God's reputation was at stake. And he couldn't stomach giving to God that was of a hand-me-down or second-hand nature. He didn't believe that we should give God our leftovers or our spare stuff, that we should give our first and best to God. I took a course from him, and as he was walking the class through the syllabus, which is kind of like the teacher-student contract, and every teacher says, read the syllabus, read the syllabus. Like I say, read your Bible. But when he walked us through that, he explained that I had to type all my work. Well, I didn't know how to type, but I had wanted to be an artist, so I knew how to print very carefully. After class, I respectfully approached him and reasoned with him why I should be able to write out rather than type out my papers. And he tapped his hand on my chest a couple of times and said, type it. He said, if this was Harvard or Yale, you wouldn't balk at doing what's expected. He says, why is it that we don't give the same respect to the Lord and to what the Lord calls us to do as we would to a higher institution in our country? Those kinds of things sunk in with me. So, if you ask me, I would not only tell you that, but I would say, ask the Lord how you should glorify him. I believe the Lord's answer will be intimate to your relationship with him. And I believe that God, when he reveals to you what would glorify him in your heart, in your life, it would not only be intimate, but it would stretch your faith in him, your trust in him, your belief in him, your dependence upon him. He would become more real to you. After praying at the 24-hour prayer vigil, I snagged 4 to 4:30 because then Starbucks would be open and I could run down there and grab a Starbucks, which I'm giving up, yes, but it hasn't, don't be greedy. And so I went to my study to work on this message some more. But I picked up my devotional first. It's a devotional by Paul David Tripp that Shelley gave me. And I turned to yesterday. When I'm talking about yesterday, it was Saturday, November 19th. And I began to read, and the heading of the devotional was this: we must never let our enthusiasm for the gift replace our worship of and service for the giver. I thought, wow, that's pretty timely when you're thinking about how do I glorify God and let's go and what to say on this Commitment Sunday that is a first fruits for us. Customarily. Then he went on to say, what we celebrate as a blessing from God can become an idol that rules and directs our hearts. And that made me think of Jesus in Matthew 6, 24, 25, where he says, serve God and not money, which implies that money and all that money stands for, or as the King James Version uses it, mammon, which maybe is a little broader in our notion than just cash, but everything that represents money. What is money, Jesus was teaching, can actually take the place of God. And then I read this: good things can replace the giver of those things in my heart. Good things. See, they're not bad things. All good things are from God. His gifts are good. That's part of his character. But these very good things that he gives to us so freely, which we say, that's grace, that generosity, that free gift of God. But sometimes we take those things for granted, or we claim credit for what is given to us. And by the way, I guess I got choked up because I can't even account for how I got here right now to talk to you. I mean, I can plug in certain things, but it just doesn't all make logic to me. Good things can tempt us to put the gift in the place of the giver. That's why glorifying God will be very personal, because only God will know what's choice and what's spare. Only God will know if it's a sacrifice or not. Only God will know if it's faith that's carrying us into this. Trust, belief. I mean, real belief that you are the creator of the universe, that all that belongs to the world and all that is in it is his. If we really believe that, then glorifying God will stretch us. As Christine said in welcoming and introducing us today to this service, she said, sacrifice can hurt. But then it becomes exhilarating because faith feels so good, so real. And you've notched up your walk with God. It's become more genuine, authentic, and real. Paul's desire to glorify God seems as natural as his breath. And we see him glorifying God in Philippians chapter 4. We're going to look at verses 10 through 20. It would be edifying to read through Philippians at a clip. Just read it and just take it in. And it would amaze you if you think about what's going through Paul's mind. What's on his heart? What kind of faith does Paul have? And I think we would be somewhat thrilled to kind of experience the faith life of Paul. But in these verses 10 to 20, we really see him glorifying God. And he closes this letter with personal thanks to the Philippians for their gifts and their generosity. But he's glorifying God in the process. Good things here, the good things they have done, the good things that Paul speaks of, those good things highlight God, the giver. The Philippians' gifts do glorify God. They honor God. Their faith is showing here. And we're seeing their faith through Paul's eyes. He is reflecting in a letter that is carried by a messenger from Rome to Macedonia, which is where Philippi is. You know, there would be, unless it was some kind of state emergency, the travel of mail really would be either by foot or at best by a clip of horseback. And it would take time. So this letter has come to them in which Paul is responding to Epaphroditus, who showed up where Paul is being held in house arrest, waiting trial before Caesar. And there comes Epaphroditus. He shows up, and he has baggage from the Philippians for his care and needs. And it is there that he sees their gifts to him, their concern, their affection for him. And we'll see in verse 10 that he says, I rejoiced greatly. I rejoiced greatly. And I can imagine that. As we'll learn from what Paul tells us about his conditions there. But their faith is showing in the gift, in the arrival of Epaphroditus. And what Paul tells us about them when he thanks them in these verses shows me that their gift, their caring for Paul was wholehearted, sacrificial, and Christ-centered. And I think that is really glorifying to God. So let me read 4:10 through 20. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly because once again you renewed your care for me. You were, in fact, concerned about me, but lacked the opportunity to show it. I don't say this out of need, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I find myself. I know both how to make do with little, and I know how to make do with a lot. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being content, whether well-fed or hungry, whether in abundance or in need. I'm able to do all things through him who strengthens me. Still, you did well by partnering with me in my hardship. And you Philippians know that in the early days of the gospel, when I left Macedonia, no church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving except you alone. For even in Thessalonica, you sent gifts for my need several times. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the profit that is increasing to your account. I've received everything in full, and I have an abundance. I am fully supplied, having received from Epaphroditus what you provided, a fragrant offering, an acceptable sacrifice, pleasing to God. And my God will supply all your needs according to his riches in glory and in Christ Jesus. Now to our God and Father be glory forever and ever. Amen. God is the invisible partner in their relationship. Paul opens the great rejoicing in the Lord of verse 10 and closes with the jubilant exclamation, all glory to our God and Father forever and ever. God is the invisible partner in giving and receiving. In 1 Corinthians 4:7, here's how Paul talks to us, just as he talked to the Philippians, the Thessalonians, and other churches in that day. And this whole series of messages, this is the 5th of 5, the gift, grace, gratitude, generosity, and glorifying God, all out of Paul's letters. Why? Because Paul's pastoral at heart. And what he writes to the people then, we identify with. It could be written to us, even though we'd have a really tough time adjusting to their world, and I think they would have an even harder time adjusting to ours. But because stories can be handed down, and you could read a story that's 3,000 years old and enjoy it as much as if it were written yesterday, that tells me that we're all made of the same stuff, and we respond to the same things. And the things that Paul writes to these Philippians, he could have written to us today. And this is the way he talks. When he talks to people he loves and cares about in Christ, he wants to stretch their faith. Here's what he said to the Corinthians. What do you have that you didn't receive as a gift? What do you have that you didn't receive as a gift? Or God, who multiplies seed for the sower, will multiply our supply of seed. And to the church in Rome, he writes, and he concludes chapter 11. This is a pretty amazing thing. Who has first given to God that God should be indebted? That's an amazing line, isn't it? Could you point that person out? Who has first given to God that God should be indebted to that person? Well, it's a hypothetical question, and he thinks it's ludicrous. Of course, no one. God is the first giver. And then he continues. He says, everything comes from God. All exists through God. All ends at God. To God be the glory forever. The picture of God in Scripture that is personalized in Christ is that God is a generous God. Very generous, very gracious, very giving. Grace characterizes his giving because it's not given, it's not poured out based on the merit of the receiver. It's just, he's a cheerful giver. When we give, we recognize his character, and we give generously. It glorifies God to give a gift that's wholehearted. We see this in verse 10, 11, 12, 13. It glorifies God to give a gift that's wholehearted. In verse 10 it says, I rejoiced in the Lord greatly because you renewed your care for me. What's important to appreciate here is, and the translation I read brings it out a little better, but we don't know that they didn't have the opportunity. In fact, there's evidence in Paul's own letters that sometimes people were writing him as being too expectant of giving, and he had to even back off. So he may have interrupted the exchange of giving between him and the Philippians. Also, he was often on the road. So it may have been that they didn't know where he was. They didn't know how to give to him. But what is consistent here is that he says, you've always cared. You just haven't always had an opportunity to show it. And what he's thanking them for is a tangible show of their faith, their gift, their care. They love Paul. They love the ministry that they are partners of. And if you read the letter of Paul to the Philippians at a sweep, partnership, friendship is all over this letter. But it's interesting how he rejoices in the Lord greatly, and then immediately in verse 11 he says, not that, which means, I don't want you to misunderstand me here, not that I have a need. Now, some of this is cultural and conventional. In antiquity, there were levels of friendship, if you will. The highest form of friendship was the friendship that was based on good. Not just my good, your good, but good. Virtue. The lowest form of friendship was a friendship that was based on need. And so they often made fun of the parasite or the flatterer. People who had money had to look out for their friends because their friends were in it for something, not for the good, not for the mutual good, not for the higher good, but just to get money or have a need met. And Paul wants to make perfectly clear that that is not the level of their friendship. He wants to raise their awareness of their friendship to a higher plane. And he's doing it in these few verses here that close out his letter. Paul insists that needs are met in the Lord, and he stresses that all sufficiency is the sufficiency we have in Christ. He wants to separate the giving from the idea that they are meeting Paul's need, or Paul needs them to give, that his need might be met. He sees this as totally about the Lord, about glorifying the Lord. Because God is the one who satisfies the needs. Christ is the sufficiency that is Paul's completeness. So God is the invisible partner in this deep and true friendship and partnership. And having cleared the air in verse 14, Paul says, it's very good of you to partner in my hardship. We already know that, and we saw this last Sunday in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 through 5, which ends with, they first gave themselves to God. That's what Paul wants to elevate. And his affection for them is very, very clear in this letter. In fact, if you look just at the very first verse of chapter 4, you'll not hear Paul talking about others quite like he does the Philippians. Then my dearly loved and longed for brothers and sisters, my joy and crown, in this manner stand firm in the Lord, dear friends. The first chapter, verse 8 and 9, Paul says, God is my witness. God will take the stand for me, and he will verify that I love you with the very love of Christ. I have the very affection of Christ. Well, who else could bear witness that you're showing another the affection of Christ except God the Father? So I think that's a very strong, strong show of affection. This is a deep friendship that we see in this letter. And that's that wholehearted desire that they care for Paul, they care for one another in the Lord and in his ministry, and it glorifies God. Also, it glorifies God to give a gift that's sacrificial, as we see in verse 17 and 18. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the profit. The word is literally fruit. That I seek the fruit that is increasing to your account, a fragrant offering, an acceptable sacrifice pleasing to God. Paul likens their gifts and concern to wholehearted sacrifice to God. A fragrant offering is an expression that Paul used of Jesus Christ when he offered his life sacrificially for us in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 2. So he's saying that I see what you're doing as a sacrificial gift unto the Lord. That's high praise. But it's lifting the act of giving. It's not an obligation. Nobody's going to hunt you down, and it's between you and the Lord. But this kind of giving, Paul says, is a sacrificial offering that has a fragrant scent to the Lord. Also, his language here for an acceptable sacrifice pleasing to God is drawn from Leviticus chapter 1 and 2 in the Old Testament, and it was used of offerings from the heart in response to God. And that's really how we should respond, is out of the heart because of what God's done for us. In verse 17 and 18, Paul uses bookkeeping and accounting language. He ties everything to God. He says, the profit that accrues with compound interest to your account, and that which I have received in full, which is like paid in full. In other words, I've received everything with interest. He uses this accounting language because he goes on to talk about all the riches of God that are in Christ. And that's why he says it glorifies God to give a gift that's Christ-centered. He says, my God will supply all your needs according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. May glory be given to God our Father forever and ever. So Paul says the same God who takes care of me will take care of you. That's what he says to the Philippians. The same God who takes care of me will take care of you. He will meet your needs from his glorious riches, which have been given to us in Christ Jesus. But we can become agents of his grace, agents of what God is doing, which moves this all to this higher plane. And that's what Paul wants to magnify in these final verses. I think this is a beautiful preface that Paul has given us to what we give to the Lord. It's pure in honoring and glorifying him. If you were at our Vision event a week ago Wednesday, and it was a week ago Wednesday, wasn't it? Some of the days kind of run together. But if you were at that, I shared with you about the pledge card. And this pledge card has 3 elements or ways of giving that I would just like to highlight again. The top one is courageous giving, and that's a one-time gift. And what we have been encouraging each other to do amongst leadership and encouraging you to do this morning is to give a courageous gift, a one-time gift. And as I told you last Sunday, and you can go back and watch it, but Shelley and I gave the largest single gift we have ever given, ever. The leadership of our church, 19 of us, pledged in these 3 categories, and in that one-time gift category, 19 members of our leadership pledged $407,500. So we want you to know that we are in this, and we are in it all the way because we believe in what we're doing and what God is doing, and that we are walking with him. So a courageous gift, a consistent gift, 25 months over and above our regular tithes and offerings. If you're not regularly a tither, you might think about really tithing. That would be a step of great faith for you. I remember tithing as a brand new Christian, and it's a wonderful feeling to be in touch with the Lord in that way and say, thank you, Lord. I'm giving this to show you that I acknowledge your lordship in my life, that you are the creator and giver. So that would be an amount that would be over and above our tithes and offerings spread over the 25 months. When Shelley and I came to Visalia and became members of Grace Community Church, we entered in the very same way and began tithing, and not only tithing, but giving over and above to Hooked by Faith. And then it became Preparing the Path, and then Enter the Land, and now it's Let's Go. And we bumped that up because the third area is creatively. And for me, as many of you may have heard, and I know it's a bit humorous, but I really enjoy Starbucks, but I'm giving up Starbucks for the next 25 months. Now, you may not think that's much, but I was shocked when she knew all along how much I was drinking in terms of coffee. And so that is going to bump up our over and above giving already to let's go, and we'll increase that over the next 25 months by all that we save by me not drinking Starbucks. So you can pray for me, because this, talk about suffering, right? So those are three ways: courageous, consistent, and creative. There are creative ways we can give as well. We're going to have a celebration Sunday of sorts in 2 weeks. So if you're not prepared to bring your commitment this morning or your Thanksgiving offerings, then there'll be time for that in the days ahead. Maybe some of you will get on board because you're just hearing this for the very first time. So we're going to sing Thank You, Jesus. And I know it was a small thing when Shelley and I would give our tithes and offerings on Sunday. We would take turns because we wanted to invest what we were doing with solemnness and worship. And we can do that. I know we're in a gymnasium and not in a cathedral, but our hearts are the cathedral of the Lord, and it's there that provides the worship for what we bring unto the Lord this morning. So let's sing and bring together.